right. Hey there, everybody. Thank you very much for coming. It's good to have you. I really appreciate your time. We're just going to give it a minute to have people trickle in before we get started. So, thank you again for coming. I really appreciate it. My name is David Awad. I'm one of the developer evangelists here at R3 working on Corda. We're really excited to give you guys the special topics. Probably worth starting with a quick thank you to two of my colleagues on the team, Sneha and Ashutosh, who ran this same workshop earlier today. And so we were able to learn some great lessons from them, and they were really helpful in putting this together. So I really appreciate that. So I'm going to give it another, I want to say 30 seconds or so before we jump in. So we have a good set of slides that we'll be going through, and then we'll have some interactive workshops using Docker locally and then Azure. But we'll jump into it when we actually look at the agenda. So if you could, actually, it'd be great if we could get a quick poll of your experience with Corda. If you could maybe just share that in the chat, type a 1, a 2, or a 3. 1 being not very experienced with blockchain or new to blockchain, and 3 being very experienced with blockchain. It'd be good to get a sense of that just off the top of the bat. All right. I guess we're about 2 minutes in. Hopefully it won't be too hard for more people to join. So I'll just get started. So, like I said, this is a special topics workshop using Corda with Docker. So I'm just going to jump into the slides, and we'll tell you a little bit more about how we can do this. So, first, some references. Obviously, this is not the only YouTube video on this channel that I've done or that the DevRel team has done. So if you're looking for other resources, you can by all means check out the YouTube. We're on Slack. You can reach out to me and the rest of us online anytime on Slack at slack.corda.net. We also run regular office hours. You can find the documentation on docs.corda.net. We have a free developer training site you can also use, training.corda.net. We have, of course, the Corda source code available freely for anyone at github.com/Corda. You can email us online at devrel@r3.com. And, of course, we're on Twitter at Corda Blockchain, at InsideR3, with the hashtags Corda and R3. So, the agenda today is pretty straightforward. I'm going to give you guys a quick overview of Docker. We're going to talk about how you can run a Corda network locally using Docker Compose. We'll break for some questions, and then we'll run a Corda network on Azure. And just as a quick heads up, one of my colleagues from the DevRel team, Peter Lee, will be watching the YouTube comments. So if you have any questions at all, feel free to post them there, and I'll try to check back as well and talk to some of the questions we got about halfway through as well. So if all that makes sense, it should be a good time. Trying to think if there's anything else. So otherwise we'll after that we'll run the Corda network on Azure. We'll talk about how you can do that, and then hook up the Node Explorer to it to get things running nicely. So just to start with the basics. So what is Docker? Docker is essentially a tool for you to isolate processes and rapidly spin up and spin down an environment around a process in a way that is completely machine independent. So for example, if I have some Python web application that I've written that requires a specific version of Python and a specific version of several packages, I can outline everything that that process needs to run correctly in a file called a Docker file, and then I can take that Docker file and run it on any machine that I want, which is pretty nice. So that this can make it really easy for you to take multiple applications or multiple tools and administer them at the Docker level of abstraction instead of at the actual process level of abstraction. So of course, as you get more abstract, you can manipulate your abstractions more flexibly in ways that are consistent and scalable, which is really powerful. And so we're seeing in the industry the massive power that this has in the DevOps community. And so we're making some investments into making it easier for people to use Docker for Corda, especially in their cloud deployments for production. So you're going to want some download links for this workshop. The first is going to be the download for the Yo Corda app. You will find that online right about here. Let me make sure you can see that. There we go. So the Yo Corda app is the first thing you're going to want to download. It is my favorite Corda app. It is literally a Corda app that sends a Yo from point A to point B, and it just sends it right across, which is quite nice. So I'll start with that and throw that in the chat if you'd like to follow along. Then the next thing you're going to want for part 2 of our workshop is going to be something my colleague Ashutosh uploaded not too long ago to our samples repo inside of the Docker-Bootcamp branch. Now what this is a set of files for configuring a Corda network in production on Azure, and we'll send you that. I shouldn't say in production. We're going to configure what's essentially a developer network, but that also is going to be something you're going to want to take a look at. And just lastly, for the actual Docker image we're going to use, I point you to hub.docker.com, where Corda actually publishes a lot of different jars. Today we're going to use the Corda Zulu jar, which is just one of the many that we've put out. So there are a lot of different jars that we make available to people. Some looking in there might be worth doing if you're currently thinking about setting up a production Corda network of some kind. So that being said, for us, we're going to be using the Java 1.8 Corda 4.5 Docker image. So I will throw that in the chat as well. Lots of links today. So I'm going to close this. I'm going to close these GitHub pages, and we'll worry about Azure when we're ready. So now that we've gotten all that out of the way, I want to start by taking a look at the samples Java Yo Corda app. That's where we're going to start our journey. So I've actually cloned this onto my desktop. I haven't done anything crazy, so I have a folder here called Special Topics, and I'm going to I cloned the samples-java repo that I linked you to at the beginning, and I just have CD'd into the basic folder and the Yo Corda app folder. So that's all you'll need to do. And before we go further, I'm just going to shrink myself so that it's easier to see. There we go. So inside of the Yo Corda app folder, you'll see what probably looks familiar to you if you've built Corda apps before. And so in our case, if you were to clone this, you're going to want to make a few specific changes just so that we can make sure we're running on the right version of Corda and that our Docker images will work the way we expect. So we're using Corda 4.5, right? And we're going to first make sure that we're using Corda 4.5 by looking at constants.properties. Now in this case, constants.properties is actually in the parent folder here. So start by looking inside of the constants.properties folder for the Corda app, and make sure that Corda version is set to 4.5 and Corda core version is also set to 4.5. That should be the only difference you have to make here. So I'll give you a second to make that edit. Once you are done there, the next thing you're going to want to do is the star of the show here, you're going to want to look at is build.gradle. Now, 95% of this is going to be essentially exactly the same, but there are going to be some specific differences we're going to make to what would normally be the chord form task. So I'll actually show you that here. It might be prudent to do a bit of a comparison here. So build.gradle is right here, and you'll see inside of it what we're used to seeing with normal chord apps, which is the chord form plugin. The chord form plugin, which will be right about here, where you'll see the node defaults, the chord app, that we have 3 different nodes that we're interested in, the notary, party A, and party B. Now, inside of here, we're going to make 2 specific changes, and I'll show you those inside of my shell here. The first change we're going to make is that we're going to change the name to prepare Docker nodes, just to be clear about what we're doing. And instead of using the chord form Gradle plugin, we're going to use the Docker form Gradle plugin. And once we've done that, then we're going to specify the Docker image. Now in this case, the Docker image is a parameter passed to the Docker Gradle plugin. So this is the parameter you'll want to pass. As you can imagine, you can specify any Docker image you want. In this case, we're going to use the Corda Zulu that I told you about earlier. And I will stick this link inside of the YouTube chat as well. So we've specified our image. We've told Gradle that we're going to use the Docker form task. So what else do we have to do? The only other thing I'm going to add, and that I recommend doing, is I'm actually going to specify the SSH ports, just so that I can actually go onto the Corda shell live with you and actually interact with the nodes so that we can run a transaction and kind of show the system from start to finish. So we've just got the SSHD port 2224 here, and then the 2223 there. And that's pretty much it. So once we're done with those things, I'm going to, actually I'll leave this open so that you guys can see it in case anyone's going to be doing any copying. And then on the other side of it, I'm going to actually go and run the Gradle task itself. So if you look over, let's see if I've got this right. If you look over here, where the mouse is, I'm going to run the Gradle w/prepare Docker nodes task. Again, this is the one that I just created, right up here. The prepare Docker nodes task, that's just going to run the Docker form plugin. So I'm going to hit enter and just run it. Now, one note worth making, Gradle W, that executable that comes in the folder, is just a wrapper around Gradle that makes sure that it gets the correct information. So this will run for a little bit. It may take 10 seconds. It may take about 2 minutes, depending on the machine you have and the particular things that you're running, etc. In my case, it may take about 1.5 minutes, just because I've got a lot running on my machine right now. So maybe we're taking a moment, since we're going to be waiting on this for a little bit, to just ask you guys if maybe you could post in the chat what it is you're planning on using Corda to do. This is something we're always curious to see, especially on my team, how people are using Corda and what they want to get out of it. Would be really cool if you guys could share in the chat just so we could get your ideas. I should post that up here too. So yeah, would love to see your thoughts on that. We're nearly there. Shouldn't be long now. And now while that's going, I'm going to tell you a little bit more here. So where this file is actually going, the root directory of the Corda app has got a bunch of different folders here. The one that this task is going to be writing to is actually inside of build/nodes. What the task is doing is it's taking the actual node configuration and creating a matching Docker configuration within a Docker Compose file. Now what the Docker Compose file does is it says, I'm going to define multiple Docker services that will run at the same time. So that will be inside of build/nodes. And inside of here, there is party B, party A, the notary, and the cache. And it looks like it just finished, so we have our Docker compose.yml, which is nice. So now that that's in there, I can actually just go and say Docker compose. And again, Docker compose is just a tool that lets you administrate multiple Docker containers at once. So you can see that command right here. I will run Docker compose. The -f flag just lets me specify the Docker compose file, in this case the one that was just generated, and I'm going to obviously run them, so the command for that is Docker compose up. So I'm going to hit enter there, and now this will also take about 1 minute or so, unfortunately, so we'll be able to do some other housekeeping tasks while we wait for this. So I'm going to clear out this command line output, and I'm going to wait for these nodes to run. While I'm waiting for that, we have a few other housekeeping things we can do. Since Docker is now running, some ports have been allocated for these, and I'll show you how that looks. Inside of this Docker Compose file, we have pretty much what you'd expect: the version of the Docker Compose file, the definition of the multiple services that were just created, the first being the notary, of course, Inside of there is some volumes where you can see the actual files that you'd need in order for Corda to be able to run correctly on any given machine. So for example, right, there is the node configuration file, the certificates, logs, persistence files, the Corda apps themselves, which, as if you've used Corda before, you know, they're just regular jar files. Then there's the network parameters, additional node information, and drivers. So there's a lot that a Corda node needs to run, and this really saves you a lot of time. There's an accept license parameter just to make things simpler. The ports that are going to be exposed, these again are just straight out of the node configuration we were using before. The image, which again, the Docker Hub image I showed you earlier. We have the service for party A, which again is just the same files being copied over, except these are specific to party A. And you'll see that in this folder there are those multiple nodes that are running in build/nodes. You'll actually see that there is the notary party B and party A folders, and so that's where these files are coming from. So again, we see a very similar story for party A, except now we're adding that SSH port as well. Same image, party B, same story, etc., etc. So those are the three things that Docker Compose has within it that gets spit out for us by the Docker form task, which is really nice. So assuming all that's good, I'm going to do a quick Docker PS. Now this will show me what ports on my local machine has Docker allocated for me to be able to do what I want to. In this case, to access the nodes, right? So I want to access port 2223. This is the SSHD port we reserved so I can get access to the Corda shell, so that I can actually run my flows and do all of the operations I normally would. Now for party A, it looks like my host machine has 32778 mapped to the containers port 2223. So I'm going to just go into my known hosts and make sure that I don't have anything for localhost, because you can get burned by this. Yeah, so there's 32772, so I'm going to delete that. It looks like that's the only one I've got, which is good. So now I'm going to do an SSH to user 1 at port, whoops. SSH to user 1 at, in this case, 32778. Now, if you're wondering why I used user 1, this actually also comes from build.gradle. If you look inside of build.gradle, you'll see that the username we created for party A is user1, and the password we configured in the Corda node configuration is test. Make sure not to use that in production. So, that being said, I'm going to then go and say, all right, SSH user1 at localhost with the port number of 32778. All that makes sense. Then I'm just going to hit enter. And so SSH asks me if I'm sure I want to connect. I'll hit yes. There we go. And then I'm going to type test, my password. And it says welcome to the Corda interactive shell, etc. So it looks like it worked. I'm going to just do a quick flow list. And we see a lot of what we'd expect. So it looks like I have the ability to do some of the default flows, and of course I can run the yo flow. So if I just try to run yo flow, of course, nothing happens. Or sorry, if I tried to run flow start yo flow, there we go. I'll get the help message from Corda telling me how to run the flow. So I'm actually going to run flow start yo flow. Probably. I'm going to run flow start yo flow with a target of party B. So I'm going to be sending the yo from A to B. Straightforward enough. Looks like it started, created, signed, verified, sent, broadcast, and completed with a signed transaction ID. Now where this gets really powerful is now I can very quickly run, rerun, and rebuild my Corda network as I go using Docker images, and just having a Docker Compose down and rebuilding the Corda app and deploying it to the new network. So I can build a workflow where I change the actual Corda app over and over again and just make changes to test them really quickly by just using the node shell directly. There's also a feature worth describing where in the future you will not actually have to do a Docker PS to get the port. You can actually specify it so that it binds to your local host. That's actually a feature I pushed for, which is nice. And that'll be even easier for you because you'll be able to just specify a particular port and always SSH onto that one to make it even faster for you to iterate on your Corda networks. So, now that we've tackled those, I want to jump into my next demo for you. Assuming everyone was able to get this to work, hopefully, if you are following along, you're able to kind of make this happen. We can set aside a little bit of time if you do want to try to make it happen, or if you'd like, you can follow up with us on Slack after. Hopefully, it's not too hard to find us, and we'll give you the links again right after. So, anyone have any questions so far before I keep going? I'm going to jump into the actual YouTube chat here and see what people are saying. Does Corda work with Kubernetes? Yes. Corda does work with Kubernetes. We have some really nice production guidelines. I can try to find a way to get it to you if you're on our Slack after, or you can email us, and I'll get you the guide. Yes, also works on GCP. GCP meaning Google Compute Platform, I believe. Unless that acronym means something else, I don't know. Is it possible to generate certificates using OpenSSL or Key Tool and not using the Gradle task? Is there any documentation around this process? That's a good question. I do not honestly know whether it's possible to generate certificates custom yourself. I'm sure it is, actually, thinking back. I would have to dig in the documentation, but I have a vague memory of someone asking a question around that, specific thing, like trying to generate the Corda certificates themselves. I think we had a Stack Overflow question around that too a little while back, and the short answer is it's going to be harder, which I'm sure you know if you're the kind of guy that likes to generate your own SSL certificates. So I think there is some documentation around that, but I don't have it on hand and wouldn't know where to look for it. So maybe after, if you want to email us or hit us on Slack, I can try to find it for you. Awesome. Okay. So I'll jump into the second piece of my demos here. So the second piece of that is going to be the Azure files. If you want these, I'll drop this link in the chat one more time. Yes, Nitesh, I can find you some documentation after this workshop if you can join us on slack.corda.net. Feel free to send me a message or post in general, and I'll try to get you. I know we have some information around getting it on. There's some like specific deployment guides I know that are out there, so I can try to find them for you. So, we're now done with the Yo Corda app at the very least, so we're going to grab this Docker Bootcamp folder, and I have it prepared right over here. So inside of my other folder here, I actually might be in the wrong. There we go. Not sure how that happened. So inside of my folder on my desktop, I've got an Azure demo folder, and so we're gonna spin up the Azure. We're gonna spin up 2 VMs in Azure from start to finish, and then we're gonna wire them up to the actual Node Explorer, so you can see that they're networked together, and then get a good understanding of everything you can do from there and how easy it can be. So inside of Azure, of course, we're going to create 2 VMs just for the basics. We're going to use the Bootcamp Corda app this time. You probably noticed that here. The Bootcamp Corda app is pretty simple. So we're going to start with the basics. We're going to create a VM. In this case, I'm going to create one on Ubuntu Server 18.04. Nothing crazy. Now I've got a resource group set up for myself here. The VM name, we're going to call it VM1. The image is going to be Ubuntu Server. And of course, I'm going to select an SSH key. I'm actually going to use my own. And if you're doing this at home, I recommend doing it this way just because it's the easiest. So I'm going to cat my SSH ID RSA.pub. This is just my public key, nothing crazy. And on Mac, I'm going to pipe it into a command line utility called pbcopy. That will just pipe it into my clipboard from the shell, which is quite nice. So I'm going to go there. There's my SSH key, and I'm going to then go into the networking tab here, And I'm actually going to select a specific network configuration to allow all of the traffic through there. So I'm going to select a network security group called David Demo Network Security Group. And all this does is I've created a network security group within Azure that allows me to take all inbound traffic. Any protocol, any port, right? We're making this as simple as possible. I would highly recommend not using something like this in production. This is only for the sake of demonstration. And of course, you can create unique specific rules for SSH, TLS, etc. If you were trying to do a more serious setup. So just to get us started here, I'm going to use this security group, which allows all inbound traffic and allows all outbound traffic from our node. And so we're going to create our first one. I'm going to hit review and create. So of course there's some pricing information, some product details, and what we're interested in mostly just Ubuntu server. Now I've got a pretty large node, which is recommended generally when you're running Corda. So at least 8 gigs would be good for a production setup, I'd say. Our username is going to be Azure user, and that security group is really the big things to make sure of. And it's going to have a randomly generated public IP, which is going to be important for us in a minute. So I'm going to hit create. Now it's initializing our deployment, submitting it. It's in progress, which is nice. So now I'm going to open a new tab. I'm just going to go back to the home page. And we're going to do the same thing for a second VM. And I'm going to create a resource, another Ubuntu server. If you're following along, hopefully this will be your chance if you missed it the first time. So again, the resource group, not important to us since we're doing a live demo. I'm going to name this machine VM2. Same situation for the key pair. I'm going to paste my own SSH ID RSA. And in the network settings, I'm going to go and specify my group one more time. Yeah, so here's that David Demo Network Security Group. And I'm going to go to review and create. So here we are. Nothing crazy. I'm going to hit create to create my virtual machine. And now we should have our first VM and our second. So it looks like this has deployed the first one. So we now have VM1 and VM2 is deploying. So I'll start by just SSHing onto the first one. If you're following along, you should have a public IP right up there. And you're going to want to copy that, and we're going to do a few things with it. So I'm going to go into my own folder here. So I have this Azure demo folder that just contains what I showed you guys earlier. I added another file that may not be there called commands.sh, and so I'll just show you what's in there. Azure demo commands.sh. So inside of here, I have a few commands that I've prepared beforehand just to make sure that the installation of Docker on Ubuntu goes smoothly. Hopefully it will. So I'll actually copy all this and paste it right into the YouTube chat so you can try it yourself if you want to follow along. That may not paste correctly. Never mind, it's over the YouTube character limit. Let's see if we can get past this somehow. Nope. Alright, I'm going to see if there's some way I can get past this. There we go. I apologize, this did not paste the way I was hoping, but it will work. Wow, still needs some more space. There we go. Okay, so these are all the commands. You may need to do a little bit of filtering on that. I apologize for some pain that might come with that. Now, it looks like our VM2 is done. So I've got these commands. I'm going to run them on the nodes. So I'm going to start. I'm actually going to open this in the other one in case anyone wants to see that. All right. So now I'm going to go look at the Azure demo. And I'm going to just copy this file. And I'm going to copy it onto the specific machine that I provisioned over here. I'm going to do it for VM1 and VM2. So here's VM1. I'm going to hit yes. I do want to permanently connect. Now you'll notice I don't need to type in a password. I've already given the node my public key. So I'm going to now do the same thing for the other machine, VM2. Now that one's just got the IP right there. Yes. It looks like that worked, so I'm now going to SSH. Now, while that's copying, I'm going to SSH as the Azure user to this particular node. Now, in this case, it's not going to be VM2, but VM1. Let's see if it works. There we go. All right, and I'm going to do an ls, and there's my folder. So I'm actually going to make this a little cleaner for you guys. I'm going to move the commands down here, and then I'm just going to SSH up here to the other node. So I'm going to SSH now. Azure user, again, if you're wondering where that came from, just comes from the Azure configuration that we did a little bit earlier. So that was the default username Azure gives you. And since I've copied over my public key, I don't run into any problems with the SSHing. So now for VM2, here's the IP. I'm going to SSH onto that. And there we go. We're in. And there's the Azure demo folder. So I'm going to CD into that on both. And now what I'm going to run is I'm going to go /commands.sh. I'm going to do a quick, yeah, so it looks like commands.sh is executable. So I'm going to run it, and then I'm going to do the same thing here. And so now that is going to do a couple of things. It's going to update. It's going to install OpenJDK. It's going to unzip. It's going to install, unzip. We're going to remove some packages just in case the image comes with them out of the box from Azure. And then we're going to install it ourselves directly from Docker, and then make sure that we have the right permissions to be able to run Docker Compose without any problems. So this may take a bit to run, so I'm just going to have some water, and I'll ask out of curiosity if any of you guys you know, are curious if you feel like there's other ways that you want to see Corda being used, or places where you want us to provide more information. We're thinking about making a video series of quick tips for developers. So if you have particular things with Corda that you think would be good to see some videos on, it'd be good to see if you could maybe share that in the chat. Oh, Nitesh said use pastebin. That's actually a good point. I can definitely do that while we wait for this. Thank you, Nitesh. You are the best. Yeah, this should be fine. Set the paste expiration to a week. There we go. Love it. There we go. I don't know why I didn't think to do that sooner. Thanks, Nitesh. There we go. Sweet. Bit of a fun fact, when the Mirai botnet was running in 2016 and taking down the communications infrastructure of Liberia, the guy who ran it actually went to my college and was in my computer science program, and he used pastebin to distribute the commands for his command and control server that he was using on all of those IoT devices across the planet. So it's pretty amazing the things that pastebin will let you get away with, I'll say. So I'm going to jump back into the terminal. Looks like we've got some approvals to give for a few things here. Yep. There we go. Looks good. Nearly there. Fortunately, these nodes are not running on my machine. Otherwise, this would not be going nearly as quickly. There we go. All right. Now, it looks like this is correct. One thing we're going to have to do next. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, these two nodes have to figure out how to talk to each other somehow. And so inside of these VM1 and VM2 folders, I'll jump into them now since we're done running our installations. Assuming Docker PS gives something back. Let's see. There we go. Okay. Do the same thing here. Great. All right. So I'm going to go into the VM1 folder here, and you'll see that inside of here is the notary and party A. Inside of VM2 is the opposite. There's party B and party C. And there's a Docker Compose VM2, and inside of this one there's a Docker Compose VM1. So I'm going to open the first one. And you'll see inside of here that it's a slightly modified version of the Docker Compose file we had before, but there's not much we're going to need to change here. The Docker Compose file outlines the ports that are going to be exposed like we would expect. In addition, the same thing for the notary, right? The volumes that are going to be shared, the files copied, the image that we would expect, version 3, etc. Now, the thing that we have to do before we can actually try to run this is we have to actually tell the configuration files for these nodes how are you going to get in touch with each other, right? These nodes have to know that each other exists, because right now they just exist independently on Azure out in the internet, and they're willing to accept traffic, right? We configured our network security groups, but we need to get them to be able to find each other. And so we're actually going to go and specify that inside of the node configuration itself. So I'm going to go inside of party B on VM2, and then party C on VM2, and then I'll do the same thing for party A and the notary. So inside of partyb.node.conf, the only thing we need to do is we need to change the peer-to-peer address. So we're going to go and specify specifically that no longer this address, which is from Ashutosh's previous demo, we're actually going to specify the IP, the public IP, for VM2, right? This is the actual address where this node lives, so that's what we are going to need. Then we're going to do the same thing for party C. I'm going to wipe this one out. There we go. Nice. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the notary and for party A. And I'll leave this configuration open just so you can kind of get a look at that if you want to maybe compare this with the configuration we were looking at earlier for multiple nodes. But it's not fundamentally different in any meaningful way. So we're going to do the same thing for the node.conf. You'll see here the peer-to-peer address needs to be changed, but there's that port again, 1002. So this time I'm going to get the IP for VM1. I'm going to drop that in there. There we go. I'm going to do the same thing for party A. There we go. I'm going to wipe this out. Great. Now, whoops. I think this is... Well, I may have accidentally blown away the IP here by being silly. Let me just grab that one more time. Yeah, very similar IPs, so I just want to make sure I got that right. 129 looks good. Awesome. All right. So we've done everything we need to as far as node configuration goes. We should be good to just run this now on both of these machines. So I'm going to do docker compose up -f, and I'm going to pass the file, and I need to install docker compose. Somehow I did not do that. Silly me. Well, I guess there's something to add. That's interesting. I wonder how that didn't get installed. Alright, well, that's a question for another day. Let's hope this works. Ugh. So, I'm going to run docker compose, pass the file one more time, and then up. There we go. So now it's downloading the Zulu jar pretty quickly, which is nice. That Azure has some great network bandwidth. Then I'm going to do the same thing over here. I'm going to just check that Docker Compose is there. Nice. So I'm going to go Docker Compose -f. I'm going to pass the file. I'm going to type up, and hopefully it'll do the same thing. Now this is creating a bunch of files on the local file system that it needs, just for everything to go smoothly. And as this is going, it may take a little bit just for it to download everything if you're running this on your own machine. And that's hopefully going to come out on the other side with working cluster, if you will, running on these multiple nodes. Nice. So yeah, we'll just need to give it maybe another 30 seconds or so. It looks like it gives a complaint about logger context. Huh, interesting. It's weird. Alright, well, I think I know what it might be worried about. Let's see if we run into problems when we actually try to access this thing before I... Yeah, that's interesting. So this command is supposed to fix that. So I'm going to run sudo chown whoami dash r one more time. I guess for some reason that did not hold. So there we go. Then I'm going to try that one more time. Yeah, wow. I guess it didn't take on either one. There we go. All right. Oh. There we go. All right. I'm going to try that one more time. For some reason, the permissions got messed up. Dash F. Up. There we go. Same thing here. Docker compose. Dash F. Docker up. Enter. There we go. Hopefully we'll get lucky this time and nothing breaks randomly without me expecting it. There we go. Looks like we solved our permission problem. Very nice. There we go. So now we've got our two groups of nodes running, C and B on this node and A and the notary on this one. And so now what we're actually going to do is we're going to go open the Corda Node Explorer, and we're just going to access this node on one of the VMs, and we should be able to see all of them appearing at once these guys are both ready to take connection requests. So if you've installed, or if you have not installed the Node Explorer, I would recommend giving it a shot. It's a very powerful tool created by some of my awesome teammates on the developer experience team, along with I think some work from Ashutosh as well. So if you'd like a link to that, I will include it. There we go. So you should definitely try that for the last piece of this. So in our case, I'm going to actually use the public IP for the hostname. And for the rest of what the Node Explorer needs, the Node Explorer actually is going to take the port for it to connect on the node, and it's going to take a username and password. Now in this case, this is going to be user1 and test, just like it was before, and we can see that here inside of the build.gradle. There we go. So inside of my Azure demo, inside of VM1, on party A, node.conf, it should be there. Yeah, so you can see here how we have a user called user1, a password of test, and the port number for RPC, which is what's of interest to us, is 10,006. And so this is what we're going to want to use. So I've typed user1 here, test there, again, don't use that in production, 10,006 to connect to the Docker container running on the VM. And I will hit connect. Let's see what happens. Ahaha! There we go. So we're connected to party A, which makes sense. And party A is located in Paris, France. And we have some basic information about the node that we're connected to and some network parameters, which is nice. Last modified, max transaction size. If we look at the network, we're able to see the notary, party A, and party B. So there we go. That is essentially everything you could need to know when it comes to how to set up a production. There's Party C. It's out there in Australia. How to set up a production, or at least a production proof of concept, we should say. A development network that you can use to get you to a place where you're ready to test in production network on Corda, where you can run and test all of your transactions and other tooling using the Node Explorer, which again, highly recommend. And that really is a powerful set of tooling you can get out of using Docker and combining it with the other tools that we make available for you to run transactions and other powerful features, such as, but not limited to, the token SDK and accounts SDK, which we also have boot camps on. So, all that being said, I can finally jump back into my slides and kind of get all of your thoughts on how you thought this went. Once again, for references, you can find us on YouTube, Slack, the Corda docs. We have a training site as well. Corda is open source as always. You can email us with questions, and definitely feel free to tweet at us with all of the hashtags. And if you could, please like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. You'll find links to some of these things we talked about underneath the like button as well. And so I'd like to just run one more informal poll just to see more about you guys. Are you professional, or were you attending this boot camp to learn? If you could just type a quick P or an L in the chat just to let us know what you're thinking, that would be great. So yeah, just a capital P or a capital L, just so we can know, are you a professional or are you here just to learn with us? And both are totally fine. No right or wrong answers here. And I'd love to take any other questions if anyone has them. I'll kind of hang out in the chat just for a little bit longer before we end the stream. Awesome. Looks like there's not too many questions just yet, but I'm happy to hang out for a little bit longer since there's still a good number of you guys here, which I really appreciate. Would also love to know if you thought the workshop was well prepared or if you thought it was helpful. All right, I'll give it maybe another minute or two. Worth mentioning as well that we're also on LinkedIn, and that we really do actually hold Slack in high regard. You can reach us anytime with that. We regularly run office hours on Tuesdays and Thursdays in 2 different time zones. If you're on the East Coast or out of the U.S., you'll be able to reach me and Peter on Tuesdays and Thursdays at 3 p.m. to 4 p.m. EST, actually right after this, for those of you who will have questions potentially. And of course, Ashutosh runs them on the India time zone at, I think it is 6 a.m. Eastern time. I don't know what time that is in IST off the top of my head. But we do run the office hours regularly, so if you have questions, you're definitely free to post them in general. And during the office hours, we'll also jump in there. You can feel free to reach us that way too. Could Corda node Docker can... Yeah, not sure. Could Corda node Docker join the Corda network? Yeah, I don't think there's any technical limitation behind a node running within a Docker container I don't think there's any limitations that would get in the way if you were running a Corda node out of a Docker container that would prevent you from joining a Corda network that already exists. Yep, thanks, Peter. Yeah, I think he's got it right there. Oh, Peter, that's great news. Yeah, glad to have you. 30 years in software. That's awesome. All right. So it's 2:50 p.m. on the East Coast. So we've gone through, I think, everything I have to share with you guys. So it might be a safe play to call it as far as the stream is concerned. I want to thank everyone again for coming. It means a lot to me, and the rest of us here at R3, we really appreciate it. So we'll stay on the quest and keep trying to learn from you guys and how we can make some fantastic open source tooling for the developer community. So, like I said, feel free to reach out to us. We're always happy to chat. And thank you very much. We'll talk soon. Goodbye, everyone.